The briefing room on Station Kepler-7 was packed with new arrivals from across the galaxy. Taemin sat in the back row, his tablet resting on his knee as he half-listened to the safety presentation. He had been through dozens of these orientations before, on mining stations and research outposts throughout the sector. They all followed the same pattern. Don't touch this, don't go there, follow the rules or die. Standard stuff. But this time was different. Hee-Jin, the head of the Ancient Technologies Department, stood at the front of the room. She was Vrelian, with 6 limbs and deep purple skin that shimmered under the station lights. Her species was known for being careful, methodical, and absolutely terrified of anything they didn't understand. Right now, she was talking about something that clearly scared her more than anything else. Maximum Isolation Chamber 7 houses. The Vesper Core, she said, her voice tight with tension. This artifact has been in our possession for 3,000 years. In that time, 247 beings from 16 different species have made direct contact with it. All of them died within seconds. The room went silent. Even the usual whispers stopped. Hee-Jin activated the holographic display. A crystalline sphere appeared, rotating slowly in the air above her head. It glowed with a soft amber light that pulsed like a heartbeat, beautiful and deadly. We don't know what it is, she continued. We don't know who made it. We don't know what it does. What we do know is that physical contact means instant death. No exceptions. No survivors. The core is surrounded by 7 force fields, temperature regulation systems, and radiation dampeners. You are forbidden from entering Chamber 7. You are forbidden from approaching within 50 meters. You are forbidden from attempting any kind of interaction. Taemin raised his hand. Hee-Jin's primary eyes focused on him, while her secondary pair scanned the room for other questions. Yes? What about maintenance? Taemin asked. Who services the containment systems? Several aliens in the room shifted uncomfortably. Hee-Jin's mandibles clicked, a sign of stress among her people. The containment systems are replaced remotely, she said. We do not optimize them. We do not repair them. When a component fails, we install a new one from outside the chamber using robotic arms. The equipment runs at partial efficiency, but that is acceptable given the risk. Taemin frowned. Partial? Efficiency for how long? The current configuration has been in place for 87 years. And before that? Similar systems, similar protocols. We don't change what works, Engineer Taemin. Taemin made a note on his tablet but didn't push further. He could see the fear in Hee-Jin's posture, in the way her limbs held themselves rigid. This wasn't about logic or efficiency. This was about survival instinct. After the briefing ended, Taemin approached Ji-Wan, a young human intern who had been frantically typing notes throughout the presentation. She looked up at him with bright, eager eyes. Did you see the historical records? She asked, pulling up files on her own tablet. Every death is documented. The first one happened 3,000 years ago on Vrelia Prime. A scientist touched the core during the initial excavation. She collapsed immediately. Her brain activity spiked so high it burned out her neural tissue. She scrolled through the entries, each one a name and a date and a brief description of death. Species after species tried to study it. Everyone thought their biology might be different enough to survive. They were all wrong. Taemin read over her shoulder. Vrelians, Korthans, silicates, even energy-based beings. The core killed them all the same way. Massive neural overload, catastrophic system failure, death in under 5 seconds. Why keep it? Taemin asked. If it's that dangerous, why not destroy it or throw it into a star? Ji-Wan looked shocked. Because it's a progenitor artifact. The progenitors were the first civilization to achieve faster-than-light travel. Everything we know about ancient technology comes from studying what they left behind. The core might hold the secrets to understanding where they went, what happened to them, maybe even how to replicate their achievements. Might, Taemin repeated. But nobody knows for sure because nobody can get close enough to study it properly. Exactly. Taemin spent the rest of the day settling into his quarters and reviewing the station schematics. As a maintenance engineer, he had access to all the technical documentation for Kepler-7 systems. He pulled up the files for Maximum, Isolation Chamber 7 and spread them across his workstation screens. The containment setup was impressive but wasteful. The force fields were running at variable frequencies that created interference patterns, which meant they had to operate at higher power to maintain integrity. The thermal regulation was fighting against the core's natural heat signature instead of working with it, and the whole system was built in layers that didn't communicate with each other. A safety measure that made sense in theory, but created massive inefficiency in practice. Timon calculated the power draw. The core's containment used 12% of the station's total energy output. If optimized, that could drop to maybe 4%. The excess heat being vented into space could be recaptured and used for other systems. The station was essentially burning resources out of fear. He understood the fear. 247 deaths was not a small number. But fear didn't change the fact that the current approach was unsustainable. Eventually, something would fail catastrophically, and then the choice wouldn't be between safety and efficiency. It would be between controlled intervention and disaster. Over the next 3 weeks, Taemin settled into his routine. He fixed coolant leaks in Sector 3, recalibrated the gravity plating in the residential areas, and helped upgrade the waste recycling system. Standard maintenance work, the kind of problems that had clear solutions and grateful supervisors, but his mind kept returning to Chamber 7. He started visiting the observation deck that overlooked the isolation chambers. From there, behind reinforced glass and 50 meters of empty space, he could see the Vesper core. It sat in the center of its prison, floating in a web of energy fields pulsing with that steady amber light. Sometimes the pulse was regular, 1 beat per second. Other times it sped up or slowed down with no apparent pattern. Ji-won found him there one evening, staring at the core with his arms crossed. "Fascinating, isn't it?" she said, joining him at the window. "I've been studying the light patterns. There's no correlation with station systems, cosmic radiation, or gravitational fluctuations. Whatever determines the pulse rate, it's internal to the core itself. Or it's reacting to something we're not measuring," Taemin suggested. "Like what?" "I don't know. But everything reacts to its environment somehow, even if it's just heat exchange or electromagnetic interference. The core isn't sitting in a vacuum. It's surrounded by force fields, sensors, and temperature controls. Maybe it's responding to those." Ji-won pulled up her tablet and started making notes. "That's an interesting hypothesis. Nobody's ever considered the containment systems as potential stimuli. Everyone's been focused on keeping the core isolated, not on whether isolation itself affects its behavior." They stood in silence for a while, watching the amber light pulse in its prison. "Do you think it's dangerous because of what it is?" Taemin asked quietly. "Or because of what we're doing to it?" Ji-won didn't have an answer. That night, alone, in his quarters, Taemin drafted a maintenance report. He outlined the inefficiencies in Chamber 7 systems, the potential improvements, and the projected benefits. He kept it technical, avoiding any suggestion that he wanted to get closer to the core itself. This was just about doing his job better. He submitted the report through proper channels and went to sleep. By morning, it had been rejected with a single word stamped across the top: "Denied." The alarm started 3 weeks after Taemin arrived on station Kepler 7. Not the loud, emergency kind that sent everyone running to escape pods, but the quiet, persistent ones that meant something important was going wrong and nobody knew how to fix it. Taemin was in the middle of replacing a plasma conduit in Sector 5 when his communicator buzzed. Dongwoo's voice came through, clipped and tense. "All senior engineers to the operations center. Now." The operations center was crowded when Taemin arrived. Hyejin stood at the main console, her 6 limbs moving rapidly across multiple interfaces. Dongwoo paced behind her, his military background showing in his rigid posture. Other department heads filled the room, their faces reflecting various degrees of concern. "Force field number 3 around the Vesper core is fluctuating," Hyejin announced without preamble. "The variance is 0.03%, well within safety margins, but it's the first sign of instability we've seen in 11 years. "What's causing it?" Dongwoo asked, unknown. "The field generator shows normal operation. Power supply is stable. There's no external interference. Taman moved closer to look at the readouts. The fluctuation pattern looked familiar. He had seen similar issues before, on older stations where backup systems had degraded from lack of maintenance. "Have you checked the secondary capacitors?" he asked. Hyejin's eyes swiveled toward him. "The capacitors are replaced every 10 years on schedule. They were last changed 8 years ago. But have they been tested under load?" Silence. "We don't run load tests on core containment systems," Hyejin said carefully. "Testing creates risk. We rely on scheduled replacement." Taman pulled up the technical specifications on a nearby terminal. The capacitors were rated for 15 years of standard use, but the core's containment ran at higher stress levels than standard. 8 years of elevated operation could easily degrade them faster than expected. "I could run a diagnostic from the external panel," he offered. "Non-invasive, just checking the charge retention and discharge rates." Dongwu shook his head. "We're not taking chances. I'm contacting the Galactic Council for specialized equipment. They maintain emergency response teams for situations like this." The message came back within hours. The Council's response was clear and absolute. Maintain minimum safe distance from the core, continue monitoring, and wait for the specialized drone units that would arrive in 6 standard months. 6 months. Taman returned to his quarters that evening and ran his own calculations. If the capacitors were degrading, 6 months was a long time to wait. The fluctuations would get worse, not better. And if the primary containment field failed, the backup systems would have to engage. Systems that hadn't been properly tested in who knew how long. He messaged G1. "Meet me at observation deck 7. I need a second opinion." She arrived 20 minutes later, tablet in hand and curiosity written across her face. Taman showed her his analysis, the calculations and projections he had spent the evening preparing. "The backup systems are in worse shape than the primary ones," he explained, pointing at the data. "Look at the power consumption logs. Every backup draw is slightly higher than it should be, which means resistance in the system. Corrosion, degraded connection, something. Nobody's maintaining these systems because everyone's too scared to get close." G1 studied the numbers, her expression growing more troubled with each screen. "Have you shown this to Dongwu?" "He won't listen. He's following protocol, waiting for the Council's drones." "What if you're wrong? What if the systems are fine and you're seeing problems that don't exist?" Taman zoomed in on a specific data set. 3 weeks ago, I submitted a report about inefficiencies in the containment systems. It was denied. But look at this. The day after my report was filed, someone ran a remote diagnostic on Chamber 7. Just a basic systems check. But it happened. And 2 days after that diagnostic, the fluctuations started. You think the diagnostic triggered something? I think the systems are so fragile that even a remote scan stressed them. And if a scan can cause fluctuations, what happens when those systems have to actually work? G1 sat down heavily on the observation deck bench. Through the window, the Vesper Core pulsed its eternal amber rhythm, unaware of the chaos it was causing. "I've been researching the historical deaths," she said quietly. "Every species that touched the core had carbon-based neural structures or energy matrices that functioned similarly. The deaths were all neurological. Massive data overload that burned out their brains or equivalent processing centers." Data overload? That's my theory. What if the core isn't a weapon? What if it's a transmitter, and it's been trying to send a message for 3,000 years? Every being who touched it received that message all at once, and their biology couldn't handle the volume of information. Taman considered this. So it's not actively trying to kill anyone. No, it's just incompatible with direct neural contact. But nobody's ever tried indirect contact. No buffers, no translation systems. Everyone who studied it was either too scared to try or too confident in their own biology's superiority. They watched the core in silence. The pulse rate had increased slightly, Taemin noticed. Not much, but enough to be measurable. "What would you need," Jiwon asked, "to do a proper maintenance inspection?" "Access to the chamber, 4 hours. Standard diagnostic tools and some custom adapters for the containment interface. And you wouldn't touch the core." "I'm not stupid. I'd inspect the systems, optimize what I could reach, and set up better monitoring. That's all." "That's not all," Jiwon said. "You'd be the first person to enter that chamber in 20 years. Every alien on this station would watch you on the security feeds. Hyojin might have a complete breakdown. Dongwu might court-martial you. Probably. And you're thinking about doing it anyway. Taemin didn't answer immediately. He thought about the 247 beings who had died trying to understand the core. He thought about 3,000 years of fear and avoidance. He thought about the station wasting energy and resources because everyone was too scared to ask basic questions. I'm thinking about it, he admitted. The fluctuations got worse over the next week. Force Field 3's variance increased to 0.1%, then 0.2. Dongwu evacuated all non-essential personnel from Sector 7. Emergency meetings happened twice daily. Hyojin started sleeping in the operations center, her eyes locked on the core's readouts. Someone suggested jettisoning the entire chamber into space. Let it be someone else's problem, or no one's problem at all. The motion gained support quickly. Fear was spreading faster than the actual danger. Taemin attended one of the meetings and argued against jettison. We don't know what the core does. It could be a power source. It could be a data archive. It could be the key to understanding progenitor technology. Throwing it away because we're scared is wasteful and dangerous. Keeping it is more dangerous, someone countered. If containment fails completely, the core could kill everyone on this station. We don't know that. We don't know what happens if the fields drop. Maybe nothing. Maybe the core just sits there, harmless without someone touching it. Hyojin's mandibles clicked rapidly. You want to gamble thousands of lives on maybe? Taemin met her eyes. I want to fix the problem before it becomes a catastrophe. Give me 4 hours in that chamber. Let me optimize the systems, install proper monitoring, and stabilize what's failing. 4 hours. Absolutely not. Dongwu ended the meeting with a decision. Prepare Chamber 7 for jettison. If the fluctuations reached 0.5%, they would cut it loose and push it into a safe orbit around the nearest uninhabited moon. Taemin left the meeting and went straight to his workshop. He pulled out his toolkit and started assembling equipment. Non-conductive probes, insulated gloves rated for energy work, a portable diagnostic scanner, basic tools that any engineer would use for any job. Jiwon found him there an hour later. They're going to jettison it tomorrow, she said. Dongwu signed the order. I know. What are you doing? Taemin held up an insulated probe. My job. Jiwon looked at the equipment spread across the workbench, understanding dawning in her eyes. You're really going to do this. Someone has to. It could kill you. It could, or it could save a priceless artifact and teach us something about the progenitors. Either way, better than throwing it into space because we're too scared to try. Jiwon picked up a scanner and turned it over in her hands. You'll need someone monitoring from outside. Someone who can cut the power if things go wrong. Are you volunteering? She smiled nervously. Someone has to document this. Might as well be me. Taemin finished packing his toolkit. Tomorrow, before they could jettison the chamber, he would do what no one had dared to do in 20 years. He would knock on the door and ask permission to come in. Morning came too quickly. Taemin woke before his alarm, showered, and dressed in his standard maintenance uniform. He ate breakfast slowly, methodically, the way he did everything. Oatmeal with dried fruit, coffee black, a protein bar for later. He checked his toolkit 3 times. Everything was there, everything was ready. Non-conductive probes, insulated gloves, diagnostic scanner, standard hand tools. Nothing fancy, nothing experimental. Just the equipment any engineer would use to inspect failing systems. His communicator buzzed. Jiwon's message was simple. Operations Center is planning the jettison for 1100 hours. That gives you 3 hours. Taemin replied with a thumbs-up emoji and headed for the door. Sector 7 was quiet. Most personnel had been evacuated, and those who remained were busy with jettison preparations. Taemin walked through empty corridors, his boots echoing on the metal floors. He carried his toolkit in one hand and his authorization tablet in the other. The route to Maximum Isolation Chamber 7 took him past 3 security checkpoints. The first 2 were unmanned, their gates open to allow equipment through. The third had 2 guards, both looking nervous and exhausted. Sir, this sector is restricted, the first guard said, a Kelthan with orange scales and tired eyes. Taemin held up his tablet. Maintenance inspection. I need to check the systems before jettison. The guards exchanged glances. The second one, a human woman named Park Soo-jin, according to her badge, shook her head. We have orders. Nobody enters Chamber 7. Check your protocols, Taemin said calmly. Station Regulation 7 Alpha. Critical infrastructure maintenance during emergency conditions may proceed at engineer discretion, pending administrator override. Soo-jin pulled up the regulation on her own tablet. She read it twice, frowning. This regulation is for things like hull breaches and life support failures. Containment field failure qualifies as critical infrastructure. The administrator can override my decision, but until he does, I have authorization to proceed. Dongwoo is in an emergency meeting about the jettison, the Kelthan guard said. He can't issue an override right now. Then I'm proceeding. Taemin walked past them before they could argue further. He heard Soo-jin reaching for her communicator, probably to alert someone, but that didn't matter. He would be inside the chamber before anyone could stop him, and once he was inside, the worst they could do was order him out. He could live with that. The corridor to Chamber 7 was longer than it needed to be, a deliberate design choice to give people time to reconsider their approach. Warning signs covered the walls in 34 different languages. Red lights pulsed in sequence, leading toward the chamber entrance like a path to certain doom. Fatal if touched. No organic contact. Approach forbidden. Taemin read each sign as he walked. Some were old. Their text faded from decades of display. Others were new, probably added after recent deaths. All of them shared the same message: stay away or die. The chamber door was massive, 3 meters tall and reinforced with enough metal to stop a missile. A control panel beside it blinked red, indicating the chamber was sealed. Taemin set down his toolkit and examined the panel. Behind him, he heard running footsteps. Security probably coming to stop him. He had maybe 30 seconds. His communicator exploded with notifications. Dongwoo's voice cut through first, sharp and angry. Taemin, step away from that chamber immediately. That is a direct order. Taemin ignored it. He pressed his authorization code into the panel. The system requested confirmation. Taemin. Heejin's voice this time high with panic. Please don't do this. 247 beings have died. Don't make it 248. The security feeds, of course. Everyone on the station was watching him right now, seeing him stand in front of the forbidden chamber with his toolkit and his calm expression. Taemin turned to face the nearest camera. He could imagine the operations center, crowded with personnel, all of them staring at screens showing this corridor, this moment. Ma'am, respectfully, he said to Heejin through the camera, I'm not touching anything. I'm doing a maintenance check. He raised his hand and knocked on the chamber door. 3 solid raps, the sound echoing through the corridor. Maintenance, he said loudly. Anyone home? For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then Jiwon's voice came through his communicator, barely suppressing laughter. Oh my God. Did you just knock? Seemed polite, Taemin said. He confirmed his authorization and the chamber door began to slide open. The mechanism was slow, designed to give people time to change their minds. Taemin picked up his toolkit and waited. Dongwoo's voice came through again. Taemin, if you enter that chamber, I will have you arrested for insubordination and reckless endangerment. I will personally make sure you never work on another station again. Understood, sir. I'm entering the chamber now. The door finished opening. Beyond it, Taemin could see the core's prison, a spherical room with the crystalline artifact floating in the exact center. 7 force fields created a web of energy around it, visible as faint shimmers in the air. Temperature sensors and radiation dampeners hung from the ceiling like metal stalactites. The amber light from the core pulsed steadily, painting everything in warm, rhythmic color. It was beautiful. Taemin stepped inside. The door began to close behind him, sealing him in with the most dangerous object humanity had ever encountered. Taemin, wait! Jiwon's voice. I'm setting up external monitoring. Don't do anything yet. I'm just looking around, relax. He walked slowly around the perimeter of the chamber, staying well away from the core itself. The containment systems lined the walls, a maze of cables and generators and backup power supplies. Everything was coated in dust, the accumulation of decades without proper maintenance. His communicator crackled. Jiwon again. Okay, I'm recording everything. Your vital signs are normal. Chamber temperature is stable. The core's pulse rate just increased slightly, but that might be coincidence. Noted, starting inspection. Taemin approached the nearest force field generator and opened his scanner. The device hummed to life, displaying readings across its small screen. Power draw was higher than it should be, efficiency at 63%, harmonics out of alignment. He made notes on his tablet, speaking aloud for G1's recording. Force field generator 1, northwest position. Running hot, inefficient harmonics. Recommend recalibration and capacitor replacement. He moved to the next generator. Same problems, different degrees. Each system was struggling, compensating for degradation and poor optimization. They were still functional, but barely. Another few months and the whole network would collapse. Everyone said these systems were too dangerous to maintain, Taemin said, mostly to himself. But look at this. It's standard equipment, just old and tired. There's nothing mysterious here. It's just engineering. Yejin's voice came through his communicator, quieter now. What do you mean? Taemin gestured at the generators, forgetting she couldn't see him, then remembered the security cameras. These systems are fighting the core instead of working with it. Look at the temperature regulation. The core emits heat at a steady rate, but the dampeners are trying to force it to zero. That creates stress. It's like trying to stop a river by building a dam and hoping it holds forever. Eventually, something breaks. What would you do differently? Let the heat flow. Redirect it, capture it, use it. Work with the core's natural emissions instead of against them. Same with the electromagnetic signature. The force fields are set to block everything, but that means they're at maximum resistance constantly. If we tuned them to the core's actual frequency, they could run at a fraction of the power. G1's excitement was audible. That's brilliant. Nobody ever thought of that because they were too scared to study the core's emissions. Fear makes you stupid, Taemin said. He moved to the next system, scanning and documenting. Not always. Sometimes fear keeps you alive, but sometimes it just keeps you from solving problems. He worked his way around the chamber, system by system. The core watched him with its pulsing amber light, neither threatening nor welcoming, just existing. The way it had existed for thousands of years, waiting for someone to understand it. After an hour, Taemin had documented every major system failure and inefficiency. The picture was worse than he had thought. Jettisoning the chamber might actually be the smart choice if nobody was willing to do proper maintenance. These systems wouldn't last another year, but he wasn't ready to give up yet. He set down his scanner and pulled out his toolkit. Time to see if he could make a difference. Taemin, Dongwu's voice calmer now but still tense. What's your status? Alive and working, sir. The containment systems are in poor shape, but they're repairable. I'm going to make some adjustments. Adjustments? What kind of adjustments? The kind that might keep your station from losing a priceless artifact, sir. There was a long pause. Then Dongwu sighed. You have 2 hours. After that, I'm sending security in to drag you out. Thank you, sir. I won't need that long. Taemin smiled and got to work. Taemin knelt beside the first thermal regulator and opened the access panel. Inside was a mess of corroded connections and outdated components. He could fix this. Not perfectly, not in 2 hours, but enough to make a difference. G1, can you hear me clearly? He asked. Yes, your audio is good. Video feed is stable. Everyone in operations is watching. Great, I'm going to narrate what I'm doing. You record everything. This needs to be documented properly. He pulled out his tools and began. The thermal regulation system is working against the core's natural heat signature. The core produces approximately 200 watts of thermal energy continuously. The current system tries to reduce that to 0, which requires constant active cooling. I'm recalibrating the dampeners to redirect the heat instead of fighting it. His hands moved quickly, adjusting settings and replacing burned-out resistors. It was simple work, the kind of thing any competent engineer could do. But nobody had bothered because getting close to the core meant risk, and risk meant possible death. The heat can be channeled into the station's thermal grid, Taemin continued. 200 watts isn't much, but it's free energy. Why waste it? He moved to the force field generators next. These were more complex, their settings buried in layers of safety protocols. He pulled up the interface on his tablet and started making changes. The force fields are running at maximum resistance across all frequencies. But the core's electromagnetic signature is specific. It broadcasts primarily in the 300 to 400 gigahertz range. If we tune the fields to that frequency, they can maintain containment at 30% power. Hyojin's voice came through his communicator. mandibles clicking nervously. You're reducing the field strength? That's incredibly dangerous. I'm optimizing the field configuration. The strength stays the same where it matters. We're just not wasting energy blocking frequencies the core doesn't even use. He made the adjustments carefully, watching the readouts on his tablet. The fields flickered slightly as they reconfigured, then stabilized. Power consumption dropped immediately. The generators ran cooler, quieter, see? Taman said. It's working with the core instead of fighting it. Everything runs better. He continued working, moving from system to system. The capacitors needed replacement, but he could at least clean the connections and improve their efficiency. The radiation dampeners were set to block particles that the core never emitted, wasting power on phantom threats. An hour passed. Taman's back ached from kneeling on the metal floor, and his hands were cramping from delicate adjustments. But the chamber was transforming around him. Systems that had hummed with strain now purred smoothly. Warning lights that had blinked red now glowed steady green. He sat back and wiped sweat from his forehead. The core pulsed its amber light, and Taman realized something. The pulse was steadier now, more regular. It had been erratic before, speeding up and slowing down randomly. Now it beat like a calm heartbeat. Jiwon, are you seeing this? The pulse stabilization? Yes. It started about 20 minutes ago, right after you finished the thermal system. Taman stared at the core. It was reacting to the stress in the containment systems. When we were fighting it, it fought back. Now that we're working with it, it's calming down. That supports my theory, Ji-won said excitedly. It's not a weapon. It's communicating. Maybe the pulse rate is a signal. Taman stood and approached the core slowly, staying outside the innermost force field. Up close, he could see details invisible from a distance. The crystalline surface wasn't smooth. It had facets, patterns that might be decorative or might be functional. The amber light came from deep inside, from a source he couldn't identify. He pulled out his scanner and aimed it at the core, careful not to cross the force field boundary. Data flooded the small screen. Electromagnetic emissions, thermal signature, faint radiation in the safe spectrum, and something else. A pattern in the emissions, regular and repeating. It's not random, Taman breathed. The core is broadcasting a signal. The same pattern over and over. Can you decode it? Jiwon asked. Not with this equipment. I'd need a proper analysis system. Time to study the pattern. But it's there. It's been there for 3,000 years and nobody noticed because they were too busy dying to listen? Yejin's voice was quiet. They died trying to listen. Their neural systems couldn't handle the data volume. Because they were interfacing directly, Taman said. Their biology was trying to process the entire transmission at once. Of course they overloaded. You can't drink from a fire hose. He looked up at the security cameras. The core isn't hostile. It's desperate. It's been trying to send a message, and every time someone touched it, they died before they could receive it. That must have been frustrating. You're anthropomorphizing a crystal, Dongwu said through the communicator. Maybe. Or maybe the progenitors built something that needed to communicate and didn't consider that other species might not be compatible. Either way, the solution is the same. We need a buffer system, something that can receive the transmission and convert it into a format we can process. Can you build that? Ji-won asked. Taman looked around the chamber. He had his toolkit, the station's maintenance supplies, and the equipment already in the room. It wouldn't be elegant, but it might work. Give me another hour, he said. You have 40 minutes, Dongwu corrected. Then security is coming in. Then I'd better work fast. Taman pulled components from his toolkit and started improvising. He needed a receiver that could capture the core's transmission without direct contact. The scanner could do that. Then he needed a translation matrix, something that could convert the raw data into something a computer could process without overloading. He cannibalized parts from the old containment systems, soldering circuits together with quick, precise movements. This was the kind of work he loved, taking disparate parts and making them into something new. Not pretty, not standardized, but functional. What I'm building, he explained while working, is basically a very dumb intermediary. It'll receive the core's signal, store it in buffer memory, and output it slowly enough that our computers can analyze it without burning out. Think of it like recording a conversation instead of trying to remember every word in real time. Will it work? Hee-jin asked. No idea, but it won't make things worse. He worked faster, aware of time slipping away. The translation matrix came together piece by piece. A data receiver, connected to a buffer array, connected to the station's computer network. Simple in concept, messy in execution. With 10 minutes remaining, Taemin made the final connection. The device hummed to life, its indicator lights blinking as it initialized. He positioned it carefully, angled toward the core but outside the force field. G1, I'm going to activate the receiver. Monitor the station's computer systems. If anything starts overloading, shut down the connection immediately. Ready when you are. Taemin took a breath and activated the device. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the core's pulse quickened and data began flowing into the buffer memory. The device's lights blinked rapidly as it worked to process the incoming signal. It's working, Ji-won said, her voice filled with wonder. I'm seeing data, lots of it. The buffer is holding. No overload. Taemin watched the readouts on his tablet. The core was transmitting continuously, a steady stream of information pouring into his improvised receiver. The translation matrix was converting it slowly but steadily into a format the station's computers could read. How long until we have something meaningful? He asked. At this rate? Hours, maybe days. This is a huge transmission. The chamber door slid open. Dongwoo stood in the entrance, flanked by 2 security guards. He looked at Taemin, at the humming equipment, at the steadily pulsing core. Your time is up, Dongwoo said. What exactly have you done to my station? Taemin gestured at the translation matrix. I fixed your containment systems, reduced power consumption by 60%, improved thermal efficiency, and I built a receiver so we can finally hear what the core has been trying to say for 3,000 years. Dongwoo walked slowly into the chamber, his eyes scanning the modifications. He stopped at the nearest force field generator and examined Taemin's adjustments. You rewired critical safety systems without authorization, he said. Yes, sir. You entered a forbidden area against direct orders. Yes, sir. You risked your life and potentially everyone else on this station. Yes, sir. Dongwoo was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at the core, pulsing steadily in its web of energy, no longer fighting the systems around it. And it worked, he said finally. Yes, sir. It worked. Hyejin entered the chamber next, moving cautiously as though the floor might give way beneath her feet. She approached the core slowly, all 6 limbs trembling. It's calmer, she said. I can feel it. The energy in this room is different. Because we stopped fighting it, Taemin said. We started listening instead. Ji-won's voice came through the communicators. Everyone needs to see this. The translation matrix is working. We're getting coherent data. It's a message. The core is sending us a message. Dongwoo looked at Taemin. What kind of message? I don't know yet, but we're about to find out. The lights in the chamber flickered as the core's transmission intensified. The receiver worked harder, its components heating up from the data flow. Taemin watched the readings carefully, ready to shut everything down if it became dangerous. But the danger didn't come from the core. It came from what the core was trying to tell them. The operations center had never been so crowded. Personnel from every department packed into the room, standing shoulder to shoulder, all of them staring at the main display screen. Ji-won sat at the central console, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she processed the data flowing from the core. Taemin stood beside her, still wearing his maintenance uniform, still carrying grease stains from his work in the chamber. Dongwoo was on his other side, arms crossed, watching the screen with an unreadable expression. Hyejin occupied 3 chairs, her limbs spread across multiple workstations as she cross-referenced the incoming data. The core's transmission filled the screen in waves of color and pattern. At first it looked like random noise, but as Ji-won's algorithms processed it, structure emerged. Language, mathematics, images. It's a warning, Ji-won said, her voice barely above a whisper. The progenitors left us a warning. The screen shifted, displaying what looked like a star map. Thousands of points of light arranged in familiar patterns. The galactic core, the spiral arms, their current location marked with a pulsing indicator. They're showing us the galaxy, Hyejin said. But why? The map zoomed in, focusing on a region of space far from any inhabited systems. A point appeared, growing larger. It looked like a tear in space itself, a wound in reality that pulsed with dark energy. What is that? Dongwoo asked. Ji-won pulled up more data. I'm not sure. The translation is still rough. But the progenitors are calling it, I think the closest word would be convergence, or collapse, a point where space-time becomes unstable. The image changed again. Now it showed the convergence point expanding, spreading through the galaxy like cracks in glass. Star systems disappeared as it passed. Whole sectors of space simply ceased to exist. When does this happen? Taemin asked. Ji-won's hand shook as she typed. According to the timestamp in the transmission, it already started. 4 months ago. The convergence began in the outer rim, exactly where the progenitors predicted it would. It's moving inward at approximately 1 light-year per week. The room went silent. Someone dropped a tablet, the clatter echoing in the stillness. Hyejin's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme stress. That's impossible. We would have detected it. Our long-range sensors would have seen something. The progenitors are explaining that, Ji-won said, reading faster. The convergence doesn't register on conventional sensors because it's not destroying matter. It's removing it from normal space-time. Everything caught in the wave simply stops existing in our reality. More images flowed across the screen. The progenitors had mapped the convergence's path through the galaxy. It would reach the core worlds in approximately 18 months. Kepler-7's current position would be consumed in 11 months. This is why the core killed everyone who touched it, Taemin said quietly. It was trying to deliver this message immediately all at once. A 3,000-year-old emergency broadcast. Dongwoo leaned forward. Is there a solution? Did the progenitors leave us instructions? Ji-won scrolled through more data. Yes. They developed a technology to stabilize space-time to prevent the convergence from spreading. The specifications are here along with construction plans and power requirements, but what? The power requirements are enormous. Building even one stabilizer would require the combined output of a dozen star systems for 3 months, and they recommend building hundreds of them to create a network that can stop the convergence. Hyejin made a sound like wind through crystals, a Vrelian expression of despair. The Galactic Council will never agree to that. The coordination required, the resource allocation, the political complexity. It would take years just to negotiate. We don't have years, Taemin said. We have 11 months. The room erupted in conversation. Some people denied the data, insisting it must be a mistake. Others argued about whether to trust a message from the extinct progenitors. A few simply stood in shocked silence, processing the reality of galactic-scale extinction. Dongwoo raised his hand for silence. It took several tries before the room quieted. Ji-won, can you verify this data? Cross-reference it with our sensor networks? Already doing it, she said, pulling up astronomical records. I'm checking for anomalies in the outer rim, anything that might confirm the progenitor's warning. She worked in silence for several minutes. The room waited, barely breathing. There, Ji-won said finally, pointing at a cluster of data points. 4 months ago, we lost contact with Survey Station Gamma 9 in the outer rim. We assumed it was a communications failure. But look at this. Right before they went silent, their last transmission mentioned spatial anomalies, sensor readings that didn't make sense. Then nothing. She pulled up more records. Station Gamma 12 lost contact 3 months ago. Station Beta 7, 2 months ago. All of them in the outer rim. All of them reporting spatial anomalies before going silent. The pattern was clear. The convergence was real and it was coming. Hyejin spoke carefully. We need to contact the Galactic Council immediately. They need to see this data. Agreed, Dongwoo said. He activated the long-range communicator. Priority Alpha transmission to the Council chambers. Authorization code Dongwoo 77 Echo. We have critical information regarding galactic security. The response came quickly. The Council was in session, dealing with reports of lost stations in the outer rim. They were already worried. Dongwoo transmitted everything. The Core's message, Ji-won's analysis, the evidence from the lost stations. For 6 hours, Station Kepler-7 became the center of galactic attention. Council members from across the galaxy reviewed the data. Scientists confirmed the mathematics. Military analysts assessed the threat. Slowly, reluctantly, they accepted the truth. The galaxy was ending, and they had less than 2 years to stop it. The first emergency session of the Galactic Council in 300 years convened within 12 hours. Every member species sent representatives. The chamber that normally hosted quiet debates over trade agreements and border disputes now faced the greatest crisis in galactic history. Taemin watched the proceedings on the Operations Center's main screen. He had given his testimony earlier, explaining how he accessed the core and built the translation matrix. Some council members praised his initiative. Others called him reckless. A few suggested he should be prosecuted for violating safety protocols. He didn't care much either way. The message was what mattered. The council debated for 3 days. Resource allocation, construction timelines, political considerations. Taman found it frustrating. The progenitors had left them everything they needed, complete instructions for survival, and the council was arguing about jurisdiction and budget concerns. On the 4th day, they reached a decision. The Galactic Alliance would build the stabilizer network. Every member species would contribute resources and personnel. Construction would begin immediately at 200 sites across the galaxy. The largest mobilization of resources in recorded history. It might work. It had to work. Back on Station Kepler-7, life slowly returned to something resembling normal. The Vesper Core remained in its chamber, still transmitting its warning but now properly understood and monitored. Taman's modifications to the containment systems became the standard approach for all progenitor artifacts. Other ancient objects, previously deemed too dangerous to study, were reassessed. Hygiene led the effort, working with human engineers to develop safe methods for examining artifacts without the paralysis of fear. What had seemed impossible before Taman's maintenance check now seemed merely difficult. Ji-1 published her research paper about the core and the convergence. It became the most read scientific document in galactic history. She included a section about human risk assessment versus traditional galactic protocols, arguing that sometimes survival required willingness to question assumptions. The paper made her famous. She didn't seem to enjoy it much. 6 months after the core's message was decoded, the first stabilizer came online. It worked exactly as the progenitors had predicted, creating a bubble of stable spacetime that halted the convergence's advance. Over the following months, more stabilizers activated, forming a network that slowly began pushing the convergence back. The galaxy would survive, not unchanged, not without loss, but it would survive. Taman received commendations from 36 species, awards he stored in a box under his bed. Dongwu formally reprimanded him for violating safety protocols, then promoted him to Chief of Engineering. He-Jin stopped having nightmares about the core and started having dreams about what other secrets the progenitors might have left behind. One evening, 9 months after his maintenance check, Taman stood at the observation deck overlooking Chamber 7. The core pulsed its amber light, peaceful now, its message delivered after 3,000 years of waiting. Ji-1 joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Another artifact arrived today, she said, handing him a cup. It's been classified as too dangerous to study for the past 500 years. Council wants to know if you're interested in taking a look. Taman sipped his coffee. What kind of artifact? Nobody knows. It's a black cube about 2 meters on each side. Completely inert as far as we can tell. Previous attempts to scan it resulted in equipment failures and 3 deaths from unknown causes. Sounds promising. The Council is arguing about protocols. Some species want to wait for specialized equipment. Others want to study it remotely for another century. The usual bureaucratic paralysis. Taman smiled. When does it arrive? Tomorrow morning. I'll take a look at it. Just like that? No risk assessment? No consultation with safety committees? Ji-1, we just saved the galaxy from a space-time convergence because I knocked on a door and asked permission to do my job. I think we can handle a black cube, she laughed. The Galactic Council is going to love that attitude. The Galactic Council can file a complaint. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the core pulse. Somewhere in the galaxy, stabilizers held back the convergence. Somewhere else, scientists studied progenitor technology with new confidence. And on Station Kepler-7, a maintenance engineer prepared to knock on another door. The next morning, Taman arrived at the receiving dock early. The black cube sat in a temporary containment field exactly as described. 2 meters on each side, perfectly smooth, darker than empty space. Around it, warning signs in 40 languages all said the same thing. Dangerous, forbidden, approach at your own risk. Taman set down his toolkit and examined the cube from a safe distance. It didn't pulse like the core. It didn't emit any detectable radiation. It just sat there being aggressively cube-shaped and mysterious. Ji-1 arrived with her recording equipment. Ready when you are. Have you noticed, Taman said, that every time someone declares something too dangerous to study, they're really just admitting they're too scared to try? Is that going in the official report? Probably not. He picked up his toolkit and approached the cube. The containment field buzzed around it. creating a barrier of energy that kept everyone at least 5 meters away. Taemin examined the field generators, noting their configuration. "These fields are set up wrong," he said. "Same problem as the core. They're fighting the artifact instead of containing it. Can you fix it?" "Give me an hour." He got to work, adjusting generators and recalibrating settings. The cube watched him with its absence of features, neither threatening nor welcoming. Just existing, waiting for someone brave enough or stupid enough to figure out what it was. Somewhere in the operations center, Dongwu was probably watching the security feeds and wondering why he promoted the engineer who caused him so many problems. Somewhere in the Galactic Council, bureaucrats were drafting new protocols that Taemin would ignore. And somewhere in the galaxy, the progenitor's legacy waited to be discovered, one maintenance check at a time. Taemin smiled and kept working. After all, someone had to do it.